An orchid with color-changing flowers? Stay tuned to find out. Hi, welcome to Attainable Green. I'm Jess, and today we're going to be talking about the flowers of the Cattleya intermedia. Recently, I made an interesting discovery about the flowers of the Cattleya intermedia. But first, let me give you a little bit of context about this plant beforehand. So recently I got this Cattleya from Odom's Orchids in Florida and had it shipped to me here in Southern California. When I took it out of the box, it had two growths. The more mature growth just started to bloom out its flowers, and then the second growth had a couple of buds that were still forming. So when the first flowers fully opened up, it looks like the classic Cattleya intermedia orlata form. That basically means that the petals and sepals have this really light pink blush tone to it with a few spots, and the center of the midlobe and the lip is purple. So it gives it a nice contrast with that kind of pale color, and the lip really pops and stands out. So after I received it, I put it outside in my patio where all my other Cattleyas are growing, and it gets pretty strong direct light. And this past couple of weeks have been really warm because we're going through a heat wave. So it got high temperatures, high light, and when the buds finally matured on that second growth and the flowers appeared, the coloration was completely different than what I expected. As you can see, the entire flower is purple, that deep, rich purple tone, and the orlata form is still there. So the midlobe and the lip are definitely a darker color of purple or magenta than the rest of the flower. Originally, when I saw that, I thought, oh man, they must have put two plants together, and this is why we have one kind of pale colored bloom and one really purple flower. I thought it could have been a different form, like a rubra form or something like that, because this plant is more known for its pale coloration. So I checked the rhizome of this plant, I followed the path through all of the growths, and this is indeed one plant connected all together. So it's never been cut or severed. So even though the flower colors are different, this is still one plant. I had to do a little bit of digging and research to figure out what caused this kind of coloration. There was one article somebody wrote about their plant and it did the exact same thing. So I think this particular clone is known to have that kind of dark purple coloration in its flower potential. I heard someone say that in the wild, the Cattleya intermedia has a very widespread range. It can grow anywhere from sandy beaches up to kind of like this forest mountainy top area. So because of its widespread distribution, it tends to have a huge variety of color forms and shapes, and it just makes it really interesting. I think in Brazil it has as many color forms as the Cattleya purpurata. So there can be a whole show about just the Cattleya intermedia in all its forms, shapes, and colors. But that didn't tell the whole story. There was a brief mention about how if Cattleya intermedia is growing in higher highlight conditions, they tend to be more magenta in color compared to the more paler cousin. So after that, I decided I would just contact the grower of Odom's Orchids. So I contacted Rob and I asked him, hey, I have this plant, I just got it. So when I took it out of the box, it had these pale color flowers, and now it's blooming out these kind of purple magenta flowers. What's the deal? And he replied to me that environmental conditions and factors definitely play a role in how the flower color is expressed in the Cattleya intermedia. So because this form has a deep color potential, the higher light and the temperature that you give it, the more darker the coloration and saturation of the flowers. And if you were to grow this in cooler conditions and lower light conditions, then you would get more of that pale contrasting color. Usually for this plant, when it first opens up, it'll be quite pale in color, kind of a creamy, greeny, whitish tone, and then in a couple of days it'll color up, and in highlight conditions it can bloom out to its full color potential, which is the color that I see here. So to me, it's really interesting how light really plays a role in flower color for this particular plant, and it'll be an interesting experiment later on to see if I can replicate this look next year with the new growths. Most images that I see about the Cattleya intermedia, they tend to have the more paled coloration, because the flowers tend to bloom in the winter to spring season. There are a couple of other orchids that change color over time. A lot of Brassavola nodosa hybrids tend to have great coloration when they start out, and then as the flower ages, it tends to fade. There are also a lot of Cattleya hybrids, usually the yellow forms, that start out kind of this pale yellow color, and then over time it deepens to kind of a golden yellow or even an orange tone. So if you've experienced something like that with your plants where the flower comes out and then over time it ages or changes color, I would love to know. And if you do have a Cattleya intermedia that's done the same thing or something similar, please let me know in the comments too, because I haven't really heard of that before, and to me this is quite a dramatic change. I also talked to Stephen Van Campen-Lewis briefly about it, and it is pretty exciting because I don't think it's ever really been documented before. Usually the color change is very subtle, like it can be pale pink to a light pink, but I've never really encountered one that was almost white to this dark purple. So that's quite a drastic shift, and I definitely love that. I like that this plant kind of has that ability to kind of change color and look a little different depending on your environmental conditions. So that's what I wanted to share today about the Cattleya intermedia and its beautiful flowers. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to follow along on my orchid growing journey. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!